had anxiety, depression, and schizophrenia. And the self punishment and the self hatred that mounted within that I turned that onto myself. And as a youngster at 12 years old, I didn't know how to deal with this. After 3.5 decades of this mental illness, my physical being was so denigrated that I began to literally fall apart physically. I came down with all of the different conditions and all of these different illnesses. But again, like my mental illnesses, the expert in the field just told me it's incurable. I was faced with this. I'm just continuing to go downhill and I'm not going to get better. And not only that, I'm not going to survive. So many people look back on their life and they can recall a time in their life when they felt good. I don't ever have memories of ever being well. My early memories are back when I was 3 years old. At 3, I was anxious and depressed. When I got to be 8, 9, 10 years old, that turned into being diagnosed with schizophrenia. I lived in this dark, tortured place where voices screamed at me 24 hours a day. I would slip into paranoia, delusions, and these voices would at me to harm myself and to harm others, to harm my family. So then was the diagnosis of anorexia, and I began to lose weight very rapidly and skip meals and manipulate my meals and hide things from my family and lie to them, tell them I already ate, that I'm not hungry, all in order to reach this goal of disappearing. And about that time, 12, 13, 14 years old, the obsessiveness took over. I had intrusive thoughts and obsessive compulsive disorder. I found myself body checking and counting steps to the door, rechecking locks to make sure they were locked or make sure they were unlocked. They were symptoms that I, again, couldn't control. And as I got to be a teenager and got older, every decade these mental illnesses grew worse. I was then added more diagnoses onto the OCD, which was cutting and trichotillomania. I was cutting my arms and legs, and the trichotillomania is a scientific term for hair pulling. I was pulling out my eyebrows and eyelashes and scalp hair. Another way to self-punish, another way to deal with pain of not being able to escape what I was dealing with. So I would turn that hate onto myself. And the older I got and the more mobile I got, like while I was driving, the paranoia and the delusions were worse because these voices would tell me to drive off of an impasse. They would tell me to crash into another car. It was horrible. During all of this, I was under traditional treatment. I wasn't suffering in this without being cared for, without being medicalized. I started seeing a care team at 10 years old because I was diagnosed with my anxiety was so bad. So I had primary care physicians, I had gastroenterologists, I had then, of course, turned into psychologists and psychiatrists. And a lot of medications were tried for the mental illnesses. Over the course of several decades, they had me on and off a cocktail of 3 or 4 at a time, where they would manipulate the dose to try to alleviate the symptoms of the schizophrenia, the voices, the intrusive thoughts, the anxiety, the depression, the insomnia, just all sorts of over a dozen different psychotic meds to try to help me, try to mitigate these symptoms. But I just continued to get worse. And I saw all of these doctors. I then began being put inpatient. I was functioning at such a low level that my family thought the right thing to do. And of course, at the time, we didn't know any different. I then began this decades and decades of inpatient at facilities, sometimes in actual mental illness wards where I was surrounded with people who were diagnosed with all of the things that I was diagnosed with, and sometimes in eating disorder units. were prioritizing just what I was experiencing as being anorexic because I was at times near death. I'm 5'9", and for many of those decades, I teetered right around 75 pounds, which is a BMI of 11. So I was in jeopardy of losing my life, organ failure, heart failure. Those inpatient experiences were harrowing, to say the least. The first thing that gets done is you are put into a nasogastric feeding tube. The liquid nutrition that is supposed to be going through there are very, very inflammatory ingredients to the body and the brain that I know now since my healing. The top 3 ingredients are high fructose corn syrup, canola oil, and soy. And that's what's put through the feeding tube 6 times a day to feed you. And more horrifying than that, these same liquids that are supposed to be for nutrition are used from the cradle to the grave. These are the 3 ingredients in United States baby formulas. Those are the same top 3 ingredients for boost and ensure nutrition that you can buy over the counter in the can for your child, for your teenager, for your senior adult who's not consuming the food that they need to keep up their strength. And of course, anyone in a hospital that has surgery that needs any kind of enteric feeding, in nursing homes for the elderly, it's used all the time. It doesn't have the nutrition in it that it needs, of course, for our brain. Whether I was in structured eating disorder units or basic mental illness ward, then you're brought a tray of food that is backed up by the hospital's ideology, and 9% of the time there were no animal products on my tray. They were all individually wrapped, ultra-processed foods of cakes, muffins, brownies, pies, waffles, pancakes, cereal, and I was taught by the registered dietitians and the nutritionists to be healthy, I needed to be on a plant-based diet. I didn't need to consume anything other than what was being pushed basically in the food pyramid. Lots of starchy grains, low fat, low to no protein, and because these individual hospitals were vegetarian and vegan based, the protein got pushed into another whole level of just, if you felt that you needed it, let's combine peanut butter and wheat bread, let's combine beans and rice. That will, substitute what you think you need. And of course, when I would try to follow that, I had such GI distress. I literally was physically ill. I had heartburn and nausea and indigestion and IBS and GI distress. And I would quickly relapse and just go back down to the bare minimum: a fruit, a vegetable, a cup of spinach, a cup of celery, whatever I could get away with as being lowest calorie, lowest volume, to try to manipulate and still live and still wake up next day. I was never taught, as much as I studied nutrition, I was never taught that animal foods, animal protein, saturated fat, especially fat, but animal protein, that it was nothing more than a reason to build muscle, that it was needed by our body, it wasn't needed by our brain, that my mental illness was sort of arbitrary chemical balance and a response to childhood trauma. And there was no connection to the foods that I was ingesting with my brain and my cognitive health. For 40 years, I went through all of these care teams. Psychiatrists would see me as treatment resistant and not compliant because I literally could not do what they wanted me to do. I couldn't sign a contract to gain 3 pounds a week. I couldn't commit to taking these medications that were supposed to help my schizophrenia, were making me such a sedated zombie that I couldn't even function during the day. So psychiatrists would basically look at me and say, you need to not come back, that there's nothing we can do for you and you're not following And they would either throw up their hands and say, we don't know what to do for you anymore. You need to look elsewhere, or I'll refer you to a new psychiatrist and you can start over with them and see what they can do for you. Or they would be condescending and say, you're doing something wrong because I'm giving you the right medications. You're doing something wrong, and there's something wrong within you, and you need to move on and find someone else. Even though I felt helpless and hopeless, there was a tiny light within that I kept coming back to. And I know that it was God's action over me. And I know that it was my husband refusing to give up on me, refusing to believe that there was nothing out there that could help me, even though there wasn't. I started looking at what does our brain need? I started looking at this differently. I knew doing everything that I had done before was never going to reach any kind of symptom relief. So I started reading and researching and pouring through literature online and in books. And I found Dr. Georgia Ede and Dr. Chris Palmer, who are metabolic psychiatrists. And back then, their books weren't out yet, but what's in their books is what I found in print and what I found on YouTube, small pieces of videos. And there was a light bulb moment where they both began to talk about the over 100 neurotransmitters in our brain, and the building blocks to make those neurotransmitters are amino acids. Yep. And the best amino acids that are bioavailable come from what? They come from animal foods. That struck me hard because at the point that I was researching that, I had spent 35 years not consuming any animal products, not an egg, not a bite of chicken, nothing. And I watched this talk over and over. I read these research articles over and over, and I pondered this. Could this possibly be true? Is this something that possibly help me? And I've missed this throughout my entire life. Could this possibly be an answer? If it just makes me a little better than what I currently had been, it was be worth the try. Now, the next challenge was how? How do I do this as a 70-pound lifelong anorexic who is plagued with male voices that screams to starve and to harm other people? How would I implement this? At the very end, before I started moving away from Big Pharma and moving away from traditional treatment, I had endured 5 fractures in 5 years. I spent more time being housebound in a wheelchair, in bed, on crutches, in braces, with casts on my arms and legs. I spent more time that way than not that way for 5 years. And also within that 5 years, at the very end, I have major medical complications that had to be addressed surgically. I had 7 surgeries in 15 years, and they all surrounded the fact that I no longer could hold my internal organs in place. I had gotten to a place where I was not only skeletal externally and had lost all of my external muscle, I now was basically eating away at my internal muscle. And our organs are held in place by muscle and fascia, and I had lost all of that. So I had spent several months in excruciating abdominal pain, and I ignored it for a long time because I didn't know where to turn, of who could help me with this, but got to a place where it was preventing me from going to the bathroom. And so I began going to specialists and finding out, what's wrong. I finally was diagnosed between 3 different specialists that I had multiple organ prolapse. I had internal organs that were just slipped out of position so badly that they were pressing on other organs inside. And when I would stand up, they prolapsed externally. So I was really at the end. I was not functioning mentally. I was broken physically, and recovery from all of this took 4 to 6 times longer than it would be for someone else who was of normal health, of normal weight. Real healing takes place. That took me many months of a structured plan of starting to implement animal foods and eating, forcing myself 1 bite a day. And when I got used to it, 1 bite became 2 and 2 became 3. And my husband, as advocacy and as a source of checking in with me to make sure I was promising and fulfilling myself what I had promised to do. And so he kept tabs on me, kept a check on me. Have you increased? Have you gone from 3 bites to 4? Have you gone from 4 bites to 5? And it wasn't without issue. I spent a lot of weeks crying. I can't do this. A lot of weeks, this is too hard. But the longer I went and the more that I ate, the darkness and the veil of what I had existed under started to dissipate, started to come down. Those walls to come down, and I began to have those improvements of your anxiety is lowering, my depression is lowering. The times that I would cut my legs, which nightly, would become less frequent. At the 6 to 9 month mark in there, at the very beginning, that was when I started to notice reduction in my schizophrenia for the first time in my ever memories. No medicine had ever reduced it. They only just sedated me and made me groggy and made me apathetic towards life. But when I finally got to enough nutrient-dense meat and fat, these voices that plagued me my whole life now were quieter for the first time in my life. They felt like they were in another room with the door closed. And I had never experienced that ever. And so I just kept going. And these 6 mental illnesses that I was diagnosed with, they just slowly just reduced and reduced and reduced again and reduced again. And I was just standing back watching this, watching with miraculous wonder of how all of this was just lowering as a direct cause and correlation to how much meat I was eating and eliminating the vegetables that I had been on to explore what we now call the lion diet of just beef and water, and to understand what those overconsumption of plants were also doing to me in the oxalates that were in the spinach and the celery and the phytates and the lectins that I had overconsumed day after day after day without anything else in my diet. It was just a tremendous feeling to experience this. And at the 1 year mark, everything was completely gone. That was 7 years ago. And I've not heard a voice since then. I have not cut myself since then. I have not experienced any sort of dip into depression, anxiety, OCD. And at that 1 year mark, no one can tell me that the anorexia was better or gone because I was weight restored. At that 1 year mark, I had not gained anything yet. I had increased my meat and fat consumption so slowly over the course of that year that my metabolism raised. And as I ate more, I burned more. And as a consequence, it took much more food in my second year to actually put weight back on, to put muscle back on. It was not gaining weight that helped my anorexia or put it into remission, or however you to clarify and classify it. It was metabolic brain healing. It was mitochondrial cellular structure neuroplasticity healing that took place by the lion diet. And every feature of the anorexia is also gone. I do not look at food as punishment. I do not look at exercise as punishment. I do not have any thoughts whatsoever of self-hatred, of manipulating food to make it serve its purpose for me in manipulating what I weigh or what I look like or what I see in the body dysmorphia is also completely gone. That was gone at the 1 year mark. And that was when I could see myself for the first time and not see someone who was obese and realize, how did I survive? This is what I truly look, and I have to do something about this, because the mental illness of anorexia was gone, because the brain healing was complete. There was no block in attempting to gain weight. And I have a life that I never thought possible. So many people say that a carnivore lifestyle, a carnivore diet has given them a second chance at life. I have to go one step further and say that it's given me my first chance at life, because I'm living a life that I've never had. I'm living an existence in every facet of my life. This is not just about what I eat. This is not just about what's on my plate. This has affected me to the very cellular level. And this has changed my relationships with other people. This has changed my confidence in being able to be a loud proponent of this lifestyle and the healing that can occur for mental illness and chronic illness. This has changed everything about me. It has changed my personality. It has changed me from darkness to colorful. It has changed everything. It has changed the time that I spend with my husband. That used to be, I would pretend and white knuckle through eating out with him, through watching a movie with him. Everyday pleasures that you would take for granted with your significant other were a struggle for me, because I was so mentally ill. And now I don't have to pretend anymore. Now it's reality. It's real. I can relax and sit around and watch movies with him. We can spur of the moment go out to eat, and I can order a steak and just really enjoy myself. Whereas before, if I forced myself to go out to eat with him, I was an anxious, depressed mess, and all I could order was a plain bowl of lettuce to pick through and try to salvage an evening with my husband. And it's just so different now. I wake up every day so blessed, so grateful to be living in the here and now, and to have a future, to not be a burden to my family or a burden on society, to actually be an equal player in my household. Before, I was so weak and so skeletal and so physically ill, I couldn't carry the laundry. I couldn't carry groceries. I couldn't put firewood into the fireplace to help keep our house warm. Now I'm strong. I have no illnesses. I no longer have osteoporosis. I spent time researching and developed a protocol to reverse that. With my hypothyroid, I no longer have that diagnosis. I also no longer have the interstitial cystitis and all of the painful pelvic syndromes that I had, because that was an oxalate toxicity issue. I'm completely healed of all of these different ailments that were told to me to be incurable. And I'm just so thankful. There are millions of people out there suffering. Just in schizophrenia alone, there are 20 million people suffering with schizophrenia, and it grows every year. And I believe the mental illness is skyrocketing because our bent on plant-based diet. The low-fat, plant-based, high-grain, high-starch diet is not helping anyone's brains. And so the diagnoses of all of these different mental illnesses are just skyrocketing the last 4 decades. And it's just awful. And in the anorexia field, it holds the highest mortality rate of all psychiatric illnesses. 1 in 5 die. And we have to change that. We have to, if it's not going to come from the top down, we have to do it personally. We have to do everything we possibly can to share with others what can help their mental illnesses and what can put them in remission. Food is the most powerful intervention that we have to heal mental illness and physical illness. I'm just so honored to be able to talk about it every day. There are so many people that deal with mental illness and use a ketogenic diet to reverse and go into remission and heal. And they have a much faster knowing that it's helping them than I did. Within weeks, they know that, oh my goodness, I'm starting to change. My anxiety is lowering, my depression is lowering. I'm so thrilled when I get to come along with someone that's experiencing that. But I also have the responsibility to tell them, if you, like me, are dealing with an eating disorder in all of this as part of the component of your mental illness, it's going to take longer, because the volume of food, the abundance and feasting of what you're able to put in your body every day is a direct cause and effect of how fast your brain is going to heal. If you're only eating enough food, even if it's meat and fat, if you're only eating enough to fuel your organs, to sleep, to be awakened state, to walk around the house, it's not enough abundance to actually heal your brain. It's not until you get that volume up high enough where your brain can be flooded with these nutrients that you're giving it. My takeaway is that I say very often in all of my social spaces that I no longer believe in hopelessness and in helplessness, that there is now no one beyond hope in my mind. There is no one that's too far gone. There is no one that is less and helpless. That no matter where you are in your journey of mental illness, whether it's a year, 2 years, decades, like it was for me, and the same with physical illness. If you've dealt with something for 6 months or a year, or you've dealt with it for decades, I do not believe that you cannot be helped. I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt, because I've proved it to myself and I've lived it, that what doctors deem to be incurable, they're men and women. They're not God. They are men and women who don't know everything. There is no one that is hopeless and helpless. I don't believe that. I believe that if we give our bodies a proper human diet, give it what it needs to heal, and take away the things that are harmful, our bodies have an amazing capacity to heal if we just give it what it needs and take away what harms and let the healing take place. So for food, I have to eat a lot in order to maintain my weight. If I eat less than what I currently consume, I lose weight. And I've worked hard to put muscle back on through weight training and lots of good food. I consume quite a bit of food. I eat 2 meals a day, and I would say 90% of it, and the rest of it is eggs and seafood and fish, and sometimes once in a while, but the bulk of it, about 90% of it, is beef and eggs and fish every day. Fasting. I believe fasting is superpower. It puts you into ketosis. Your body generates ketones, and every cell in your body and your brain benefits from this. But I also don't believe in forcing yourself to fast. I don't believe in forcing yourself and you're constantly watching the clock or your watch and say, oh, I've got 2 more hours to go before I can eat. Oh, I'm starving, or I'm weak, I don't have any energy. That's not the fasting that I'm talking about. Fasting should make you feel good. Fasting should give you clarity, should give you energy, should give you joy. It should add to your life, not take away from your life. So yes, I fast. Now for me personally, because I can lose weight so quickly, for me personally, I cannot do fast beyond 24 hours because I lose weight. So I try to take advantage of the best of both worlds, and I fast for about 20 hours a day. I like exercising in a fasted state. I like lifting weights and walking in a fasted state. I feel good. I have lots of energy. I used to be addicted to exercise. I used it as punishment for my body to burn calories, less. And since mental illnesses have healed, I look at it in a whole different way now. I use walking as enjoyment. I no longer do excessive cardio in order to burn calories or lose weight. I walk a couple of miles every day because it makes me feel good. It makes me feel alive, gives me more energy. It allows me to spend that time with my mom because she and I power walk together. And we walk and we talk and we share our day together, which previously would not have been possible because I was too sick. I also strength train every day. It was an integral part of healing from hypothyroid because your thyroid needs protein and exercise, and also an integral part of healing osteoporosis. Our bones are 50% protein, and you cannot rebuild bone density without weight-bearing exercise. And so those were my two driving forces. Plus the fact that I now could see myself, what I looked like in the mirror, and I wanted to be strong. I wanted to have shape. I wanted to finally have muscle on my arms and be able to lift heavy things and have fun out in the yard and help my husband with firewood. So I strength train and weight lift 7 days a week. I do an upper lower body split. So every other day is my rest day for the upper body or lower body. And I do most of it at home. So I know that for some people doing it 7 days a week would be way too much, but I'm not doing it in quantity. That 7 days a week is only 15 or 20 minutes a day. Faith is very important to me. At 18 years old, I was inpatient at the time in a hospital. I was desperate and despondent, and the nurse that was taking care of me befriended me. She spent time with me, sitting on my bed with me, and she had incredible faith. She talked to me about a loving God that wanted me healed, that wanted me to know that I was treasured beyond measure, that I was held in the palm of his hand, and that he would lead me out of this, and that he had a plan for my life. I didn't know how it could be true at the time, but she prayed with me. And at that time, I asked God to come into my life. And so for the next 30 years, I carried that with me, and I tried to reach him, but I felt blocked. My mental illnesses were like putting me into a brick dome where I knew he was there, and I knew he was alive and active in the lives of others that I surrounded myself with. I could see it. I could see the love in their eyes, and I could see God in their lives and in their eyes, but I couldn't reach it. I thought there was something wrong with me, and there was. It was the mental illnesses that were blocking me. But that is what I held on to. That is what stopped me 5 times from committing suicide, which I had planned out. Faith is what kept me waking up every day, but it was very dark. I slept a lot during those years because that was the only escape I had from the voices, from the darkness, from the bone-chilling, bone-hurting cold of being so starved. I felt helpless and hopeless, but yet that was there. When I began to heal, and I believe that God led me to finding Georgie and Chris Palmer and Dr. Ken Berry and Dr. Sean Baker, Dr. Anthony Chafee. Those were the first 5 that I found that surrounded me with the knowledge and the research to back it up that this could be my answer. I believe he led me to that. I believe he could have healed me in an instant all along the way, my whole entire life. But sometimes he chooses not to, and I believe he chose not to heal me instantly because I would not be able to help others if he had healed me instantly. I would not be able to do what I'm doing today. I would not have a message. I would not have the life that I have today in order to come alongside others. When I started to heal, that brick dome that I felt that I lived in, those bricks started crumbling. And the envy, the admiration that I always felt when I looked at other people that I felt were alive with the Spirit of God, I began to experience it for myself. The voices that screamed death at me were gone, and my brain was now functioning the way that it was always meant to function, and the light of God was able to come in. It just flooded my entire being, and that is a huge part of my story. I could have chosen to stay silent for the rest of my life. I could have lived my little healed life and not said anything. But I don't believe that that's what he healed me for. I believe that he healed me to be a voice, to come alongside. Yes, they were terrible, dark years. I can't really say how how I survived because I should not have. I've had so many near death experiences with surgery and with the mental illness part that I should not have survived, which is another miracle of faith that I believe that I was saved for a reason.